Hey guys, welcome back to CLOWNFISH TV. This is Kneon. We're going to do an update on the comic book industry situation. We're going to talk about some news going on in the comic book industry. We're going to talk about some interesting developments with Kickstarter. And we're going to talk about the future of comics and digital comics and all that jazz. It's Marvel and DC are canceling a whole bunch of titles that the comic industry is changing, and the future might not be the future that a lot of people within the industry who have tried to influence the comic book industry for the last couple of years. It won't be quite the future they envisioned, I don't think. So before we get into it, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants. If you guys have not done so already, thank you so much for the support. Now, we don't cover comic books a whole lot on the channel much anymore because it seems like the general public is not as interested in the comic book industry as they used to be. I know when we first started talking about this stuff a couple of years ago, we focused primarily on comics and manga, and then we got more into animation, and it just seemed like we could see the interest in the comic book industry kind of waning. People ask us why we don't cover comics as much, and it's basically like it just people don't seem to care. Not like they used to. The only reason they seem to care now is because the comic book industry has fallen on hard times and everybody loves to watch a train wreck. So, you know, we talk about that and kind of some of the missteps that the comic book industry has made. And of course, you know, the shutdown, you know, adding to the problems that the industry already had. So, you know, before we get talking about the individual publishers, I do want to say that it's good to see some comic shops open up again today. In fact, I was out earlier, I had some errands to do, and the local gaming shop, which opened, you know, a couple months before the shutdown, I was concerned that they were not going to come back online. Turns out that they did. In fact, I went in and talked with one of the employees for a while, asked them how things were doing, and they said they're actually doing really good. They said that they switched to a lot of online sales. They said if it wasn't for online sales, they probably would have gone out of business. So they're trying to get up and running and back to normal, but you know, it's interesting. We just kind of, you know, just talking about the industry and stuff happening, and they said that, yeah, they weren't real happy with Diamond. They felt like Diamond kind of cut and run on them like they did with other shops. They can't get Diamond to return phone calls. It's been kind of a mess, and they're like, well, then we're just going to do an end run around them. You know, we're going to get our merchandise from other sources if Diamond's not going to play ball. So, you know, Diamond did that to themselves. But it's good to see that shops are still online. Now, that is here in Pennsylvania. We're green now. We're out of the cautionary phase, I guess, where, you know, everything seems like it's kind of going back to normal. You know, most stores around here are open, or will be open again within, you know, the next week or two, which is good to see. Hopefully this continues. Hopefully we don't have a relapse. Hopefully we don't have to go back into lockdown. But, you know, a lot of shops out there aren't as lucky, especially those in New York and California. They're definitely locked down for a while. We don't know when they're going to come back online. Some of them may not come back online. And the official story is absolutely going to be that the comic book industry was doing just fine, and then along came COVID and ruined everything. And that's not what happened. There are plenty of YouTubers out there who have been covering this. The comic book industry has actually been in decline, at least the direct market. I need to clarify, the direct market has been in decline for the last couple of years now, and unfortunately, you know, COVID just kind of hastened the inevitable. And some shops aren't going to come back, but it looks like the industry in general is starting to change. You know, we're seeing some changes here. It looks like Marvel and DC are bringing books back, but they're not bringing as much material back. You know, I have to wonder what the long-term plans for Marvel and DC are, given that they're owned by Warner Media and Disney, both companies have experienced, you know, some financial hardships this year. Both companies are looking to cut corners. I just have to wonder how long until one or both decides it's not viable to publish comic books anymore and they just license everything out. I don't know. I don't know, but we're seeing that DC is canceling the print finales of RWBY and genLOCK. Now, this is interesting because we've said before that Rooster Teeth is in kind of a precarious position right now at Warner. We saw a bunch of layoffs last year. Now they are producing genLOCK Season 2 for HBO Max first, I guess, and it's not going to Rooster Teeth's platform first. We don't know how long any of this is going to last, but DC is not even going to print the final books. They are going to release them digitally, and they'll probably release a trade, but this is coming from Newsarama. DC has canceled print editions of RWBY #7 and genLOCK #7, the final issues of 2 digital first series done in tandem with Rooster Teeth. Prior to the influenced shutdown of DC's distribution channels, these 2 print issues were solicited to arrive April 8th and May 6th. The contents of those issues premiered digitally earlier in the year, so they already got them out there. The publisher does intend for these stories to see print eventually in planned collected editions of both series. I think we're going to see a lot of this. I think a lot of comics that maybe, you know, weren't going to be big sellers in single issues, I think we're just going to see trades. I think they'll release the single issues digitally, just to get, you know, some revenue on the books. But I think long term, you know, some of these books that they talk about that are supposedly bigger sellers in the book market or whatever, they'll just release them to trade. I don't think they're going to bother with single issues for a lot of this stuff. But DC's canceling more comics. Geeky sent this over this morning. DC cancels over 20 comics from their upcoming schedule. They made several changes to their schedule and distribution methods due to coronavirus, and they're continuing to adapt and make changes. Now, they are canceling 22 issues between the 2 brands of Facsimile Comics and Dollar Comics. Dollar Comics? The majority come from the Dollar Comics line, with 18 books canceled, and the other 4 made up of the Facsimile line. Those titles include Batman, Catwoman, Green Lantern, Flash, Wonder Woman, Dark Knight's Metal, and more. And you can check out the full list of cancellations. So they're canceling a bunch of these they're basically just streamlining. I mean, I would like to see Marvel and DC go back to where they were kind of in the 80s, where, you know, they had a core line. Like Marvel in the 80s, you could buy pretty much all the major titles and it wouldn't break the bank. Granted, the books were only like 75 cents back then, or $1, but you could buy all these books, you know, every month, and you can kind of keep up with everything. And now they just keep slamming out series that nobody's really asking for. So I think a lot of this kind of stuff is probably going to go digital. That would be my guess. But Marvel's doing the same thing. Marvel is switching 4 more current Marvel titles to digital only. So Valkyrie, Jane Foster, Scream, Curse of Carnage, Revenge of Cosmic Ghost Rider, and 2020 Force Works are going digital. So, you know, again, I think these oddball titles, I think you'll still see, you know, X-Men and Spider-Man and those core titles, Avengers, you're going to see them in print. But I don't think you're going to see a lot of this oddball stuff in print until they do a collected trade paperback. And that might be the publishing plan going forward, just to save money. Now, it's not going to help comic shops. It's not going to help comic shops at all. Because where are they going to make their money? Unless they sell the trade paperbacks when they come out, you know, where are they going to make their money? You know, who knows? Who knows? But they're bringing comics back to shops. Marvel's bringing comics back to shops on Wednesday, May 27th. Wednesday, not Tuesday. Wednesday, May 27th, they brought out Amazing Spider-Man, Avengers, what do they got here? Marauders, Dr. Aphra, and Venom. What, 5 books? That's it? That's it. That's it. So a lot of people are talking about the future of the comic book industry, because the direct market is... I don't know where it's going to end up, guys. I think a lot of comic shops, unfortunately, if they don't adapt, I think they're going to go under, because things are never going to go back. They're never going to go back to the way they were before. So the future does seem to be direct to consumer, at least for creators creating like niche type products. If you're not working on a Batman book or whatever, a lot of people are talking about where they think the comic book industry is going to go. EW put this article out the other day, Entertainment Weekly, and I have to laugh, because they're talking about the future of the comic book industry and how coronavirus has helped people think outside the box, right? People have been thinking outside the box for a couple of years now. IndieGoGo has blown up. We have a lot of YouTubers going to IndieGoGo and making good money. It's become a very badly kept secret. So now we've got a lot of big time professionals from Marvel and DC coming over to crowdfunding, coming over to IndieGoGo in particular, including Sean Gordon Murphy, who's coming over here, and he's at what, 160 some thousand on his book, and he still has 45 days to go yet, but they focus on these like little indie books. And I'm not saying there's not a market for that. I mean, I'm not throwing shade at any of these creators, but they're talking about the future of the comic book industry. They're talking about money, right? I would think they're talking about money, and they're really not. I'm reading this article, and they're talking more about artists being creative during the shutdown. Never mind that there are artists out there making hundreds of thousands of dollars during a shutdown when other people are being told to stop work on their books, when comic shops are closing, when publishers are closing their doors. And I think a lot of publishers this year may wind up closing their doors. But we're not going to talk about that. Instead, we're going to talk about all these indie zines that are coming out because of the quarantine. But what was really interesting here is they're talking about the future of comics. And they do talk about crowdfunding. All the way at the bottom, they're talking about Kickstarter, and they're talking about how important Kickstarter is going to be to the future of the comic book industry. And they have an interview with Camilla Zhang, who we've talked about before. She was, some people thought she was the tastemaker, the gatekeeper over at Kickstarter, responsible for possibly getting some projects canceled. You know, I don't know. But they talked to her at length, and she's talking about how excited she is about Kickstarter and to be a part of it. Their community, they're not really talking about money, they're talking about community. People come to Kickstarter to be a bigger part of something bigger than themselves. Now, this article just came out a couple of days ago, and they're talking about Matt Kent and Jeff Lemire making money, $146,000. I think I would have to check that project, but a lot of projects on IndieGoGo are making considerably more money. But again, the people that are making money on IndieGoGo, a lot of them were shunned by Kickstarter. For political reasons or other reasons, they were shunned. So they're not going to talk about that. They're going to focus on the positive. Now, the funny thing is they talked to Camilla Zhang for several paragraphs. Let's see, when did this get published? May 28th. May 28th, they talked to Camilla. At the bottom, they have to disclaim it. You know, this whole big spiel about how Kickstarter is the future of comics and Camilla Zhang is leading the way. Unfortunately, coronavirus continues to shake the American economy. In the week since we spoke, Zhang was laid off by Kickstarter along with 24 others as the unemployment rate in the United States reaches 25%. There's a shadow hanging over the present, but the future is still unwritten. Well, obviously, it's not going to be Kickstarter. I don't think Kickstarter in its current form is going to last. They had to lay off freaking 24 others. No, it's more than that. They laid off damn near half their staff, like 40 to 45% of their staff, because their revenue dropped by like 40-some%. It's ridiculous. So here's the thing. There's been a lot of talk about Camilla Zhang lately. She got gone from Kickstarter. I don't know if they're trying to make a case for her coming back or not, but Wired just published an article same day actually, the 27th, talking about how Kickstarter formed a union, and apparently Camilla Zhang was instrumental in forming that union. In fact, they talk about her at the beginning. They said that, you know, the very first paragraph on February 18th, earlier this year, Camilla Zhang wore a dress to work, one that made her feel particularly confident. She needed confidence. That day was the culmination of more than a year of hard work trying to convince her co-workers at Kickstarter to form a union. Yeah, she was trying to talk her people into forming a union, and she got gone. And in fact, my understanding is that Kickstarter begrudgingly let its employees start a union, and it was all over this comic book called Always Punch Nazis. And they go on, they talk about Always Punch Nazis, you know, how they restructured into a public benefit corporation in 2015. That's why Kickstarter 10 years ago was sane, and Kickstarter current year is insane with a lot of very iffy rules, because basically if they don't like you personally for whatever reason, they don't think your work is a public benefit, they don't have a legal obligation to let you use the platform. In Zhang's case, it sounds like she basically came in. She was only there for like 2 years. She came in, and within a year of being there was like already like pro-union, right? They talked about Always Punch Nazis being launched in August of 2018. The satirical comic about our country's battle against racism was created after Richard Spencer got punched in the face. attracted the notice of right-wing media outlets, which published an article claiming that the project violated Kickstarter's terms of service, which prohibits encouraging violence against others. The Trust and Safety team is tasked with monitoring the site's projects and watching for potential problems. They were basically up in arms on Slack. So this article, this is very important because this might actually tie into what happened with Richard Meyer's comic, Jawbreakers, which is kind of what kicked off the whole IndieGoGo explosion, because Richard Meyer was not allowed to publish his comic book on Kickstarter. And this article talks about how all of the employees at Kickstarter, discuss the merits, the pros and the cons of projects back channel on Slack. You know, they're talking about these projects as they come up. So it's very, very likely, especially since some of the people working at Kickstarter have ties to the mainstream comic book industry and have ties to some of the people who tried to get Richard Meyer canceled out of mainstream comics. It's very possible that they were talking about his book in Slack and just made the unilateral decision to not allow him on the platform since it was a public benefit corporation. But they pushed very hard for Always Punch Nazis. People, they were furious that they canceled Always Punch Nazis, and that's what led to Kickstarter forming its union. And I think Kickstarter's union was the beginning of the end for Kickstarter, and Kickstarter employees wanting to dictate who could and who could not use the platform based on personal political bias is absolutely what drove everybody to IndieGoGo. So Kickstarter basically blew itself up. They did. They became activists instead of a payment processor, and they blew themselves up. And Camilla Zhang got ousted. They laid her off. But I have a really strong suspicion that Kickstarter took the opportunity to lay off people that were pushing for the union because, as I understand it, the bosses at Kickstarter weren't really on board with it. They go on to document the whole drama behind this comic book. And, you know, then this led to them forming the union. Some of the Kickstarter employees started to believe that the best way to secure more power for Kickstarter employees would be to form a union, a vehicle not just for bargaining over pay and benefits, but for giving employees more clout. Not to mention that employees had gotten a taste of power of collective action when they pushed back against management's decision to take down the Always Punch Nazis project. Folks had been upset before, but had never energized to take such direct action. So it was a comic book that basically broke Kickstarter, and Camilla Zhang was actively involved in the union discussions. I think that's why she got gone. I mean, if you're asking my opinion, I think that's why she got gone. So we're starting to learn more about this thing, and you know, again, I don't think Kickstarter is going to be the future of comics. I think Kickstarter is, people are going to look back at Kickstarter, if it does not change, in 10 years and be like, remember when Kickstarter was a thing and Kickstarter was used interchangeably with crowdfunding, and then it became kind of a big joke in an activist platform, and it blew itself up, and IndieGoGo and possibly other crowdfunding options came along and actually wanted to make money. Yeah, that was the thing. That was really interesting, wasn't it? That was very 2015. It was 2015 when they reorganized. So I don't think Kickstarter is going to be the future of comics at all, but I do believe crowdfunding is going to have a bigger role to play in it. I do think that digital comics, I know a lot of people throw shade at digital comics, but I think this is how we're going to see a lot of single issues for series that maybe don't justify the print costs. I mean, that's not to be smarmy, but like, how many copies of these books were they legitimately going to sell at Marvel? This way they can at least make some money on digital and then just throw them into a trade later. So it's going to be really interesting to watch where the comic book industry is a year from now. I don't think it's going to look the same. I think it's going to be very, very different. I think we're going to see more of these companies positioned to sell direct to consumer, to sell digitally, and to sell trades through places like Amazon. Where that leaves comic shops, I think they're going to wind up like record stores, where they're going to have a lot of archival material, vintage material. It's going to be a destination where people go to get together and to buy back issues and collectibles and that sort of thing, which is already kind of happening. I mean, let's be honest. But we're going to keep an eye on this, of course. We don't do as many comic videos as we used to, but we do care about the comic book industry. We want to keep tabs on what's going on, and we'll talk to you guys later. Hey guys, thanks for watching CLOWNFISH TV. Please consider supporting the channel. Go to clownfishsupport.com. That's clownfishsupport.com. And if you want to join our community, go to clownfishtalk.com. That's clownfishtalk.com. Please subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. We will talk to you next time.